Hello, I'm your host Jim McClean. Welcome back to another episode of the Banterflix Movie Review Show. Let's see what we'll be talking about tonight. Our July series of specials throughout the month continues as we look back at some of our summer blockbusters from yesteryear, and this week we're heading back to 2004. So that's what we've lined up for you this week, and joining me in the studio as we head back to 2004. You were just telling me beforehand, Danny, you were 10 at that time, so the lovely Danny Brown, and Maria McQuillan, you were just 8 at this time. And I was a fresh-faced 20-year-old at university, loving life here in Belfast. So we're back in 2004. I think we've all agreed as we sit down to record this show, 2004 was a great year for cinema. Just going to quick look here, it was the year Lord of the Rings, Return of the King dominated the Oscars. We had some real noticeable movies. We had Passion of the Christ, Anchorman, one of my personal favourites, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. We all hoped Fetch would happen with Mean Girls. And more importantly, the greatest movie of our time, Alien vs. Predator. The first one hit cinemas. So that was there. It was also the year Billy Bobby Brown was born, of course, Stranger Things fame. And more importantly, the Facebook. Back then it was the. Everything had to be the. All the bands had the, but it was the Facebook launched back in 2004. And I asked you before we started to record, and I'll start with you, Danny. Can you remember when you joined Facebook? I'm assuming at 10 you weren't joining bang on in 2004, but can you remember some of your early posts?
Yeah, I didn't join until the May, June of 2014. And one of my first, so I kind of stayed away from it for the longest time because I was like, I'm not getting roped into that social media thing. But my first post was 2014, was just about to finish uni, figured myself as like a freelance kind of videographer, going out with a friend of mine who also did filming and stuff. And we'd set up our own production company called Camslinger Productions at the time. And I was like, I've not sold out to Facebook. I'm just here to co-coordinate the Camslinger Productions Facebook page. Camslinger Productions folded, never really took off. And I'm still there sharing memes, movie stuff and dogs.
But back in 2004, the future was ahead of you. Yeah. The future was ahead of you. It hadn't just worked out yet. It's still a wave of positivity back in 2004. Maria, what about you? I'm going to guess is 8. You're not jumping on the Facebook bandwagon. Can you remember some of your early posts?
So the first post I could find was me reviewing Born This Way by Lady Gaga. I was very, very positive about it. Big fan then, still a big fan now.
Did you predict big things for Lady Gaga?
I absolutely did. It was mostly just a ramble about how much I love her, so that really kind of says it all.
And that probably hasn't changed.
No, not one bit. And the other posts after that are just mostly me watching films. So and that's not too different from what I did later anyway.
Yeah, I look back, a lot of my early Facebook posts, because you get the options every day, you get your memories, a lot of them I have been deleted over the years, but looking back, I joined 2007. And there's a lot of photographs of me out and about, with darker hair, lack of beard. I think I grew into my looks, that's what I'll say. But yeah, like you, Maria, a lot of Jim McClean is watching this, Jim McClean is doing this. And I don't know why, but I seem to be poking a lot of people. I think when Facebook started back in 2007, poking was a thing. But we've moved on as a generation, I like to think, and we're no longer with the Facebook, but Facebook, thankfully, less poking involved. But on this show, throughout July, we are looking back at some of particularly summer blockbusters. And Maria, we're going to come to you first. Big year, I know I have my choice that we'll come to, but big sequels that year, your choice is one of them. What movie did you pick and why?
So I chose Shrek 2, and I think it was either the highest grossing or one of the top 3. And when I looked up films in 2004, I couldn't remember like off the top of my head. And when I saw it, I was like, that's it. That's the number one. Gotta do that one.
I'm not gonna lie, viewers. Maria, as soon as I get the list, like 2 minutes later, it was like Shrek 2. That's my choice. So that's your pick for this. We've all watched it in preparation for the show. But before we share our thoughts on Shrek 2, let's have a look at the trailer.
Look, here comes Sleeping Beauty! Oh!
I hate these ball shows! Flip over the wheel about torture? I'm not flipping anywhere.
Who's this? It's the one, the only.
Why don't you guys go ahead? I'll park the car.
So that's a look at the trailer for Shrek 2. We're back in 2004. Safe space, Maria. So 8-year-old you, loving this film. You've touched on a wee bit. Now looking back at it now in 2024, what's your thoughts on Shrek 2?
It's a film that I think has only gotten better with age. The last time I watched it, I think, was about 4 years ago. And I remember having not watched it for quite some time before that. And it's just so good. There's so many jokes that are just written on so many levels. There's lots for the kids, but there's a lot more for the adults. Like in the scene where they first get to Far, Far Away, there's a lot of like signs and like advertisements, which like I totally went over my head, but I find incredibly funny. Like one of them was Tower of London Records. It's just, yeah. And again, like the scene where they're going to Far, Far Away, I couldn't stop laughing. Like I think the line is like, "Can you not be yourself for 5 minutes?" Yeah, it's just such a great film. I can't stop singing its praises.
I don't think you're going to get much disagreement from me. Big fan of Shrek 1 and 2. I think the less said about Shrek 3 and Shrek 4. I think there's a Shrek 5 in the works. I'm not 100% on that, as I say, and we were kind of discussing off air since the original films that we now have a Shrek rave that tours around not just the UK, but I think the world, if I'm correct in that point. But Shrek 2. Yes, there's a lot of kind of standard sequelisms. You know, things are bigger than before, louder than before, but it's still got the heart of the first film, and it's kind of riffing on the classic fairy tale stories. And yes, you have Mike Myers, you have Cameron Diaz, and you have, more importantly, Eddie Murphy. Once again, just proving that it's weird. We've just had a couple of weeks ago Beverly Hills Cop 4, and I remember the first time we were talking about that months ago on Q Radio, and it's weird when you hear Eddie Murphy's voice now. I don't think of Axel Foley. I think of Donkey from Shrek. So a lot of love for this film. I think it's a pretty good sequel. I don't think there's much diminished returns. And yeah, I have to say, going back and rewatching it now, still enjoyed it on whatever umpteenth viewing it is. Danny, what about you? I'm not going to ask the silly question where, have you seen Shrek 2 before? Could be your first viewing. I've been surprised before, but what's your thoughts on Shrek 2?
This film is The Godfather 2 of animated sequels. Like, it's hands down one of the best animated sequels there is. I absolutely love Shrek 2. Like, I loved the first film, and then this was just like the perfect sequel for it. You know, I think the development with the characters and all the new characters that are introduced through this, it's just fantastic. And as you say, the humor in it is like golden, and it's all those wee nuancey things in the backgrounds like Burger Prince and Farbucks and all the rest. And I think it's so quotable, and there's still like things like Una and I'll be sitting for dinner and one of us will turn to the other and just go, "Great soup, Mrs. Q," like every time without fail. And you know, Big Mungo, the giant gingerbread man, just everything about it. Like, I love Shrek so much, like the first two films. As you say, 3 and 4, meh, take them or leave them. You also forgot to mention Shrek the Musical, which I saw when it was over here in April, which again was fantastic. It was nice that it didn't just sort of, it kind of took, it's mostly the first film, but it takes little elements from 2 as well, which is really nice. And yeah, like, I absolutely like love Shrek 2. I think this will be something that when I have my own children, I'm going to hand it down to them and be like, Shrek 1 and 2, take this, my children. It is a legacy, you know. Love the Shrek.
Well, I like the fact that I know we're technically in 2004, where physical media was still a thing. Physical media was still king. You know, the streamers not so much. Maybe down the internet was, of course, the internet was. We're not that old, but physical media was still. And I like to think, still in 2024, you're still championing physical media, Danny. So that's good. Yeah. It's weird when you look back, because particularly the first film, Shrek, kind of not turned on its head, but Disney and I suppose Pixar were back and kind of dominating the animated genre. Here we have a movie coming in that's fun for all the family. As Maria, you've alluded to, yes, there's jokes for younger viewers, but there's stuff there. The great visual gags that we see in stuff like Naked Gun movies, stuff that's going on in the background that has to be seen on the big screen. This was the film, well, Shrek, and I guess even more so Shrek 2, that showed that Disney couldn't just dominate that genre. Do you think that's something for you, Maria? Because we know we have you on We Need to Talk About Disney Pod. It is coming back, we assure you, viewers. But we've done deep dives on Disney's The House of Mouse's retrospective. But here's a film that, again, back in the early 90s was showing the CGI animated genre, that it couldn't just be all Disney's way.
Yeah, I think like whenever Shrek came out, it was so completely different to everything animated that was out at the time. Like I wouldn't have watched a lot of animated films with my parents, but we watched Shrek 1 and 2 a lot. And it's like, it was, like you say, it showed that it wasn't just Disney and Pixar who could run animation, essentially. I think Shrek was nominated for an Oscar, and again, just kind of showing like its staying power is, it still has raves. But yeah, no, I think it's one definitely, maybe we need to talk about DreamWorks.
Yeah, maybe we need to do, that could be another podcast in the works. And most importantly, we haven't really mentioned, you were telling me off for not mentioning Shrek the musical. We of course Puss in Boots, and that in itself launched, we've had 2 Puss in Boots movies since then. So yeah, great film, great choice, Maria, to kick things off in 2004. Next, I'll weigh in with my choice, and I feel like I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because yes, I know Jim McClean in 2024 complains pretty much every week on this show about comic book movies, upcoming comic book movies, and I complain about suffering from comic book movie fatigue. But here, me, in 2004, I have picked Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's sequel, another sequel. We've already mentioned Shrek 2, and that was my choice, because that is just a film, when you're talking, Maria, about you looking at a list, I looked at that list, 2004, Spider-Man 2, and before we share our thoughts on the film, I think it'll be a perfect opportunity to play the trailer.
I need to know something. Just one kiss.
So let's look at Spider-Man 2. I know a couple of months ago we had a comic book special, and at the time I couldn't decide between Spider-Man 2 or Richard Donner's cut of Superman 2 for my choice for that, and it really was a toss-up. So going back to 2004, not to say that I planned this, not to say that as host I allow myself the opportunity to indulge my movie loving, but when I seen 2004, as I alluded to, had to go for this. This, for me, is still up there, top tier superhero movies. Tobey Maguire, brilliant choice as Peter Parker. The jury's out, I guess, maybe on Spider-Man, whether he's a perfect Spider-Man. Other actors, we've had Andrew Garfield, more recently Tom Holland in the role. Tobey Maguire is probably who I think of the most as Peter Parker. And we have Doc Ock making his appearance. It's a love story, loads going on. It just takes what we saw with the original, that classic origin story, with great power comes great responsibility, and turns it up to the nth degree. Great cast, we've also got the likes of James Franco in there. We have a blink and you miss it cameo from William Dafoe of sorts, and a kind of ghost-like apparition performance. A lot of fun. And I come back to the thing I say most about Spider-Man, despite the first 3 Spider-Man movies, and I know they're going to be back in cinemas next month, all of them, all the films within the series with the Maguire, Garfield and Tom Holland era. But it's Sam Raimi, the guy from Evil Dead, doing these big massive blockbusters, not losing himself. You see, like, there's the scene with Doc Ock, the genesis, the birth of Doc Ock's character. you watch that now and you go, that is the director from Evil Dead. The same camera movements, the way it's shot, the style, very much Sam Raimi. The energy he brought to the project, all three. Spider-Man 3 is bloated. I accept that. That's why, the less said about that one, the better. It's a bloated film, but this is a lot of fun. Maria, what about you? We've talked about one sequel you loved in Shrek 2. Are you a big fan of Spider-Man 2?
Absolutely. It's like one of the films that I remember, like we bought the box set of Spider-Man 1, 2 and 3 and we would have rented them all from Extravision multiple times. And I really enjoyed watching it again because like you forget how many iconic moments are in this film. And you also forget like how good all three of the main cast are. Like James Franco, Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, they're all so good in their roles and they're so young in it as well. Like looking at it, I was like, this was like kind of not the beginning of their careers, but like, definitely like for Kirsten Dunst, it was a very big change in her career. And yeah, just like, I just really, really enjoyed it. So much of the visuals and everything still really like hold up now. I love Alfred Molina and seeing him in this, he's just so good as well. It feels like a very different style of superhero film, weirdly. I think I'm so used to the Marvel style, which is that like it's big, it's green screened quite a bit, if not almost all of it. Whereas like there's scenes in this where they're like just talking around a dinner table to each other. And I was like, God, like it's almost jarring how different it is as a movie. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And man, I was so glad to see him in Far From Home, No Way Home. I can never remember the name. But again, like I would love to see more of this world, to be honest. I wouldn't mind if they did do a Spider-Man 4.
Yeah, I mean, we never got Spider-Man 4. There is rumours, and who knows what will happen. I know Raimi, we had him back with the MCU, with Doctor Strange, the most recent installment of that, and that was, for me, it just didn't work. It was a lot of stuff, a lot of CGI. Yes, as I mentioned earlier on, when we're talking about this film, there's still elements of Sam Raimi that are there, and that director, he just knows what he's doing, knows visually what to do, and the kind of the way the camera kind of, the quick zooms, all that kind of stuff. This is just, for me, bigger, louder, better. The CGI had improved. There's a real sense of gravity to how he travels around New York as Spider-Man on his web, which maybe wasn't there in the first one. There is some clunky CGI in the very first Spider-Man movie. Yeah, it's not perfect here. We're looking back through, 20 years back in terms of CGI. I know we'll be talking about that with your choice, Danny, as well. But I know, for me, the train sequence is the standout sequence in Spider-Man 2. Just really powerful. And even now, looking back, I know they've tried to replicate it in various films that have come later in the series. And I know it's not just Raimi's Spider-Man, it's all on, maybe less so in the more recent, the Tom Holland era. There's a lot of the American flag waving. There's a lot of scenes where we see Spider-Man popping up in front of the American flag. Look, I get it. I know what they're trying to do. It's that sense we've seen that over the years, I guess, with Superman. But for me, just top tier, not just sequels, but top tier of any kind of the comic book movies over the years. Danny, where are you when? And are you going to keep this wave of positivity?
Jim, this is the Godfather 2 of comic book sequels. I love, Tobey Maguire is my Spider-Man. I grew up with these Spider-Man's my favourite comic book hero in general, and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man trilogy is my Spider-Man trilogy. I love what they did with Andrew Garfield stuff. I love what they're doing with Tom Holland stuff, but I'll always have a special place in my heart for Tobey. I mean, he's like tattooed right there. It's the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. This film, going back and rewatching it for this, just proves how much I love it. I think we've all touched on it. The cast are fantastic in this. They all really get to shine in their own individual wee narratives that kind of all tie together. But also Aunt May, the whole family drama between Peter and Aunt May in this, I was almost crying, when they're in the garden and she's packing all their stuff away, when she kind of has that moment about how she'll always love him. I was like, oh, Aunt May, why aren't you my auntie? But yeah, and
I'm sure your aunties are lovely.
oh, my auntie is lovely. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I do have lovely aunties, but just that was such a touching moment. And yeah, like the Doc Ock, Alfred Molina is just incredible. And as you say, getting to see him in No Way Home again alongside Defoe's Green Goblin was incredible. And even that brief moment of Defoe showing up and getting to give us that little zesty goblinness again. Brilliant. Talking about little cameos and zests, you know, Stanley gets a very brief, fleeting cameo in this, but my favourite, because it is a Raimi, you got to get Campbell in there. Bruce Campbell making his appearance as the kind of usher who's being real awkward is fantastic. We're saying about Spider-Man like traversing through New York and swinging about, and I think that's really elevated. It was elevated in the first film by it, but even more so in this. Danny Elfman's score to this film is superb. It's so good. And again, this is one kind of like Shrek where I find myself sort of reminiscing on it and quoting it and that, but there's one particular memory that always comes to mind, and it's when me and my cousin would like have a few drinks or whatever, and we wouldn't be done with the night, and we'd be getting like going home via the carryout, and we'd stick on YouTube and just watch like silly compilations of stuff. And there's one particular clip in this film, and it's the moment towards the end when like an iron beam is going to fall down on MJ, and Peter Parker like is a close up of his face, and he's letting out a scream. But someone's replaced the clip with like just this high-pitched little screech coming from Peter Parker. I know it just sets us off every time we think about it. But yeah, just wee things like that. It's a memory that it's like a film that I associate with a time and with memories and stuff. And yeah, it's just delightful on so many levels, and I love it.
This is the problem. I talked about this last week. When we're looking at these films, we're talking about a lot of favourites. And I don't think anyone, in the first episode in this, we've had a film yet where we haven't liked or we've disagreed greatly. And this is then when we come to your choice, Danny. Both Maria and I have picked sequels for 2004. You went with an original movie of sorts. Do you want to tell our viewers what you've picked and why?
I'm so sorry. I went for Van Helsing. I went for the 2004 Hugh Jackman starring Van Helsing because I'd looked through the list and I was kind of like, oh, there's some real bangers this year. As you know, we've already Shrek 2, Spider-Man 2, we had Anchorman, we had Dodgeball, I, Robot. There was a lot of great movies. But then I was like, I should probably go for something kind of horror related, being that I'm from the Fright Club. And I was like, The Village came out this year. But then I looked at box office number 8 of the list and seen Van Helsing and was like, you know what? Let's bring the tone down a little and talk about Van Helsing.
Okay, well, you've set it up perfectly. I think that's a brilliant opportunity to have a look at the film.
My life, my job, my curse is to vanquish evil.
We need you to go to the east, to the far side of Romania, a land that is home to legendary creatures.
I see the Wolfman hasn't killed you yet.
Don't worry, he's getting to it.
Lorded over by Count Dracula.
So that's look at Van Helsing. Yeah, as I say, Danny, we've been on a wave of positivity last week and this week. Now we get to Van Helsing. And you messaged me before we started recording this show earlier today, and you said, I'm so sorry, but this is the movie I've chosen. And I said, you should not be embarrassed by your choice. Own it. Embrace it. And we get a sense from your introduction that you have embraced it. And I don't see why not. I accept wholeheartedly Van Helsing is a flawed film. It's from the director, written and directed by Stephen Sommers, who had just done at this stage The Mummy Returns. I remember being very excited about this film. I love both those two films. There was something, we're branching out, we're sticking in horror, we're still kind of sticking with classic monster universe. You've got Hugh Jackman, who doesn't like a bit of Hugh Jackman in there? You've got Kate Beckinsale as well, who back in 2004 I had a little bit of a crush on. Yeah, still do. Hello, Kate. And it's fun, it's schlocky, it's flawed. I think it's that sense of now looking at it back, people were crueler at it at the time, but I think it's developed a bit of a cult status. CGI, we were mentioned earlier on, is a bit clunky in parts, but that's 2004. I think that's a stick we can hit movies still in 2024, where we have clunky, shocky CGI. But I think it's fine. I'll be honest, that's going to be probably the most downbeat of the three films we've discussed. It's fine, it's fun, it knows what it wants to do. It's a little bit overbloated, but I like all what it's trying to do with the classic Universal monsters. Who knows what would have happened had we got a sequel or various more installments. But Danny, do you want to come back and touch a bit more? You've set it up for us.
Yeah.
I've said I find it fine. Why do you love this?
I love it because, again, it's sort of, I remember loving it at the time. I was only 11 years old, 10, 11, and I remember really enjoying, because it was the year after League of Gentlemen had come out as well, so it was kind of, again, following that idea of like classic monsters but a new twist on it. And yeah, like even the fact that it opens with Mr. Hyde, and the year before we'd had Mr. Hyde. This Mr. Hyde maybe is not as good as that Mr. Hyde. But yeah, I think it still kind of has that appeal in that I really enjoy it. I remember having, you know, the saw blade thing that he has at the start of the film cut into the floor and all. I had a toy of one of those where you had to like press the handle really quick to get the little blade to spin and lit up and all. And that, just rewatching this, took me back to that. And I was like, okay, I still have like a nostalgia for this. And yeah, watching it back for this, I was like, yeah, that's not as good. And that story point's maybe not great. But I think where the CGI is good, it's good. Where it's bad, it's bad. I think the practical effects in this are really good. And I think the story's not the worst. It's not great, but I think as well there's really nice nods to the old Universal monsters. There's also some nice nods to other bits of horror, like the first werewolf you see is very much inspired by American Werewolf in London. And yeah, I think that it's a bit of crack, and it's also just like nice nods to kind of horror stuff that's come before. It would have been interesting had they picked up and ran with the original idea of that it was going to be a series. It was going to be like a Hugh Jackman Van Helsing series. I think that would have been cool. I also thought it was, one of the working titles for it was The Vatican Detective, which kind of, looking at it now and having seen The Pope's Exorcist, I'm like, what if they teamed up Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing with The Pope's Exorcist? You know, I was like, there's something. Could be.
Danny, it's the crossover we never knew we needed. I remember vividly at the time watching this, around 2004, so I'm assuming in my head there might have been, because I don't know off the top of my head, because we're in the studio and I just can't access my phone and IMDb, we might have just had a state of flux with the Bond franchise, but like where we are now. And I remember at the time thinking Hugh Jackman would be a great Bond. I still think, probably too old now, but I still think he would have been a great Bond, but then we wouldn't have had Daniel Craig. That's another a discussion for a multiverse and a different parallel universe. But yeah, it's fine. It's a lot of fun. I like that they try to connect all the dots with the old kind of classic monsters. Doesn't quite work. It's not up there with top tier like Monster Squad and stuff like that, what it tries to do. A lot of fun, silly blockbuster. Summer, yeah, as I say, I think of the three films, it's fine for me. And I think if that's the worst thing I can say about a movie, it's not been a bad episode. Maria, we are pushed for time, but just for yourself, had you seen Van Helsing before? And regardless of that, what's your thoughts on the film?
So I didn't think I had, and then when I started watching it, I was like, oh, I've definitely seen bits of this on like Film 4. It's not my favourite film I've ever seen. I can see why people really liked it at the time, because it's just kind of like a fun horror-esque romp. Like you say, the opening scene with like, you know, Mr. Hyde, it's all like the kind of the big favourites of horror characters. And it's got two of like the biggest actors at the time. Yeah, it was just kind of mad. I enjoyed a lot of the set pieces in it. I thought it was very like kind of fun and campy, but it was a weird film at times as well. My favourite scene though has to be the ball where they're with Dracula, and it's all like the huge like massive party going on. I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. The campy Dracula, you can't beat it. Yeah, so 2004, I think we can all agree, not a bad year for cinema. And yeah, I think 3 solid choices for this week. Next week, we're going to be going back to 1994, even further back. So looking forward to see what we talk about that. 94, another big year for cinema. So on that note, all that's left for me to do, like last week, I'm like Doctor Who, unlike Doctor Who, I don't need a TARDIS. I can take you back to 2024 pretty easy. But I hope you've enjoyed your stay in 2004. But our time is up. It's time to return to the present. So thank you very much, Danny.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks very much, Maria.
Thanks, Jim.
And thanks very much for watching at home. We'll be back next week with another summer blockbuster special. But for now, until then, goodbye.